Hi. So who uses USB devices that they've purchased from eBay and Amazon? Can I just see a show of hands from anyone who's bought one before? That's about right, yeah. I'm about to teach you in the next 10 minutes why you should never, ever do that ever again. So I'm going to begin my presentation with the rather wonderful Network Chuck, who's going to demonstrate just what a bad USB can do for you. No, okay, we lost audio. So he's very excitable, and you can see here he's got his USB stick, and he's going to explain to you it's one of the most dangerous tools that you can use in hacking. That he's going to show you in a moment, his laptop, and he's going to very, very quickly, using a script, deactivate Windows antivirus for you. So obviously an adversarial hacker could do absolutely anything they wanted to at that time. Obviously he's very shouty. Here's his crap top, that he likes to call it, and he's going to show you here. So he's not touching anything. They'll plug your USB stick in from Amazon, and there you go. It has now deactivated Windows Media Player antivirus. So there are two famous USB malware that you've probably heard of. The first one, not this one, is called a rubber ducky. If you've ever seen the Mr. Robot series, it was actually the tool that was used in that. And the second one is the bad USB that Network Chuck is showing you here, which contains firmware malware. And it was actually that type of USB that was used in the famous Stuxnet attack in the Iranian nuclear facility in 2010. Also, it was found by Kaspersky in 2020 that the type of firmware called USB culprit can actually jump air gaps into secure systems. And overall, there are 29 different types of USB malware infections. However, none of those to date have been found in e-products, e-commerce products yet. So in order to test to see if there were viruses present in the devices, there were two methods. Those are the digital forensic testing and dynamic malware analysis. And in order to do that without any contamination between those viruses and the host system, a WeBTecker write blocker was used, and that prevents the host system and the USB from talking to one another so that it can't copy any viruses across. And the second testing was to test that USB in a live laptop. And in order to protect the BIOS, so that to prevent permanent infection that again may screw up those results, sorry, the bypassed operating system was necessary. And you can see that the Windows To Go installation was installed there on an external SSD, and the USB device was plugged into the laptop, but it is completely bypassed. It's running completely off the SSD. So I'm going to take you now to my website. There we go. And we can see here there's a home page here, and it explains the project, but it's also got instructions so that you can start looking into that yourselves. And the link is here for autopsy, and it is free, so you can start doing that yourself. And we've also got the research here so that you can have a look at all the devices and where they come from and what was found. And you can see here that there's a range of devices from both eBay and Amazon. And you can see the ones on the red border were actually found to contain malware. And surprisingly, all of the red borders have the same type of malware infection and method, which we will look at now here. So 63% contained data in the binary of the unallocated storage spaces. So those are the spaces that you save your data into. And you can see that in that first image. That should be from the manufacturing floor, all zeros and all Fs in hexadecimal, and you can clearly see that it is not. So immediately that was a sign that there's something else going on. So the next step is to look at the binary itself to see if we can look at any of the signatures in that and extract out any files, which was done. I did manage to find a large number, around 3,000 Intel 86 and x64 microcode, which has never really been seen outside in the wild before, but it is something that can be used with malware. There was a wonderful university group in Rare University who managed to prove 5 years ago that it can infect a computer very easily. The extracted files that came out were all the same file. They had the same file name. They were across multiple devices. Some were different, but there were at least 2 files found on all of those devices. Oh, sorry. And you can see here that when the live lab test with USB was popped in, we've got a number of events that showed up. And what you're seeing in that second image there is an example of an encoding error. So that's where there's been a problematic signature on the Telnet 3 client. And that means that the Telnet 3 client has been modified at some point. And you can't see that at any point on the usual Windows processes. You really have to get sort of deep into the way that you look at things, the dynamic malware there. And the events corresponded to some digitally signed processes that were also taking place. So I'm going to show you now. So this is the false positive result. So they do come up when you look at signature, and that's just so that we can see the difference between the two. So you've got here me typing in the BINMORT code, and you'll see lots of false positives. So it's looking at the header, and it will do a comparison to its library. I think we're going to get some up in a second. There we go. So those would not be counted. It's something that came up on random testing, and they were ignored. But I'm going to move on now to show you what it looks like when we have a positive result. And you can see here thousands and thousands of signatures of Intel Nitro code flying through from one block of binary to the next. And that continues for quite some time. And there were 3,000 of those. So I'll just skip that. Ooh. Next is the XSTXR. So I'm just going to pause that if I can. No. So I then moved on to process monitor, which is what you can see here. And you can see here that there are lots of normal processes, but the HXTSR.exe, which is in the paper, you can have a look at it, is actually seen here very briefly, creating a very large number of files. And you can see that it says that it's popped the file into the Microsoft Communications app. And if I go to the next slide, I've now spent the last 2 weeks chasing a virus that's sort of wild on my network that's completely related to it. And we can see that Bitdefender has actually picked that virus up and given it a name. And we can see that there. That was found on 2 devices, and it is the exact same file that you saw modified after the insertion of a USB stick there. So this Trojan will arrive on the system, and it's a file dropped by other malware, which was what I envisaged was happening. And you can see that it does have the ability to send data to a remote control and command server, which is incredibly dangerous. So risk and mitigation. So I actually chased the manufacturers myself. I spoke to them. I went and sort of did a little bit of spycraft. And you can see here the manufacturers were all, and a lot of the retailers actually were all from China. And that includes all of the employees and across the registered businesses in the UK and the EU as well. And the companies have very unusual businesses. These 2 properties that you can see on the bottom here are registered businesses for those companies. They have 8 employees. I know this one here, this little flat here, very, very well. It's in my city. This is a very, very small 1-bedroom flat, and it would be very impractical to have 8 people working there doing USB distribution. And we've also looked at the mitigation. I've looked at mitigation here. So the middle picture is a vacuum packed device, and it's in coloured rice. So you will have that vacuum packed at the manufacturer's end, and it will arrive to you with a photo so that you can compare to make sure it hasn't been interfered with. We also really need to educate the public. So when I first asked you when you came in, have you bought one of these devices? A lot of you have. So I'm here today to say, stop doing that. Go to your local shop, buy the devices from there, even if it's at extra cost, because you are paying for that added security. And we also need to make sure that companies who are selling those are using that tamper-proof packaging. And we also, most importantly, need to collect more data, because this is just one of the many products that are out there, that are in e-commerce, that are in our homes, that have the potential to cause a major infection and to risk your data and your bank details and your health details. So we really, really need to start looking at more of those devices in the future. So in conclusion, there was advanced firmware malware identified by digital forensics tools, and that was identified as Intel 86 microcode. The devices contained identical files connecting them to the same adversary. The malware used digitally assigned processes to install other malware, and current mitigators focus on future prevention of cyber attacks on the public of the same kind. And that's it. And I'd like to thank Dr. Andy Farnell for his help as well. Thank you.
These are just fantastic projects, and we can, if we have to continue with projects which you all have done, I'm sure we would not leave here today. I'm sure some of you will be like, yeah, I need to show mine as well. There's just a limited amount, but you still have opportunity to show whatever project through your poster, and then people will come and ask you questions. That's a lot. Like I did say, it was a difficult session for us to kind of select the ones we just need to show you here. Any questions for Helen? Yeah.
When sort of purchasing sticks online, did you test it with like big brands and things like that?
Yes, I did, yeah. So if you actually go to the website, I can bring up the link again in a minute, you can see that those were the biggest brands. And actually, if you come to the desk in a moment, I spoke to 2 companies. I spoke to SanDisk and Kingston, who both said, absolutely, there should be no microcode, absolutely, of any description in a USB stick. That would be tantamount of a very dangerous sign of a possible infection, and that you should buy those from shops. You should go to places like Currys, PC World, you know, they're the same, but you can go there and buy them because they rely on their reputation, and without that reputation, they wouldn't be able to continue.
Just to be clear, no promotion.
No. Other shops, Tesco, everyone does them. Yeah.
Okay, any questions again? Yeah.
Can this artifact be deployed using an anti-directive environment?
The artifact is the website. So what I'm asking you to do is to go and look at a USB stick. Anyone from the tech community can buy one. You can use the instructions there, and then you can fill out the form, and it goes directly into the research box, and then we can start looking at those and then putting them on the website. And I'm really hoping that after all, this will be open data. So if other research is done in the future and they would like to have that data, it's all being popped into a SQL data set, and that can be given to people. And you can contribute with that.
My question is this, do you find out the pattern in which the malware using the antivirus, and what type of antivirus can it bypass, or is it all type of antivirus?
All types, yeah. This was only found after it affected all of the computer systems in my house.
So you mean that you pay thousands of dollars for antivirus for no benefit?
Because they found out a way around it, and that's why this firmware malware is so dangerous. It basically, especially if you use the Intel microcode, it's using a trusted platform model. So in order to decrease the complexity or the power from your CPU, it just goes straight through the back door. And 5 years ago, the encryption code for that Intel code was posted online. So it's given 5 years for someone to come up with a trigger to pop in there to put malware in that your IV is completely blind to, essentially. It goes through your CPU initially first, and then once it's on the CPU and it's installed thousands and thousands of files, you can then see a digitally signed process coming in and adding more and more and more to your system.
That's my question. How else does it install? How else does it install multiple DLL files without your permission? I mean, do you actually trace the pathway in which it executes commands?
So it's using, if you use an Intel 86 microcode, it's injecting that virus straight into your CPU. The computer is not aware of it. It's going straight in at the kernel level. It doesn't have to notify any other of the system, including the operating system, that it's there. It can just go straight in. It's one of the hardest types of malware to detect, and even these tools are very, very hard to detect it with.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
It's clear and it's different if you actually do the work, isn't it? Yeah. You know everything. So it's fantastic.
Hi.
I just wanted to know if your research was limited to just Windows or other operating systems.
So I used Windows operating system for this, as it's 90% of people use Windows machines, but I also implemented WSL, which is Windows sub Linux, to do it. So I used a dual operating system for the tests. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to leave it at that. I'm just going to let you know that what is next is, so let's give it to Helen, please.
Thank you.